This video is sponsored by Chord Company, manufacturers of the speaker cables and interconnects used by a British audiophile. For more information about these and their other products, please click the link in the description. I don't think many hi-fi enthusiasts would have heard of Elac until Andrew Jones joined them, and that was back in 2015. Mr. Jones had established his credentials during a 17-year stint at Pioneer and its sister high-end brand TAD, but it was his debut range of speakers at Elac that really captured the hi-fi world's attention. I've realised that I've only heard the debut series at shows, not even dealer demos, and I'm talking about the original series. I don't think I've ever heard the Mark II series, and in that compromised environment, as far as I could tell, they sounded fairly good, decent bass performance and a relaxed presentation. I did review Elac's Unify reference speakers, which was one of the last speakers that Andrew Jones produced during his time at Elac, and to tell you the truth, I never really gelled with them. Don't misunderstand, the Unify reference UBR62s offer reasonable performance for the £749 asking price, but they're a bit bass heavy and rolled off in the highs. They're also a bit demanding to drive by the time you've spent about £1,500 on sufficient quality amplification to get them under control. I can't help but feel that you'd want to spend a little bit more on speakers as well to get better resolution. Elac is a German brand that's existed for 95 years, one of the oldest brands in hi-fi. There's more to Elac than Andrew Jones, and since his departure to pursue opportunities at MoFi Electronics in 2022, life goes on. Elac updated the debut range in 2024. These are entirely new speakers. I've heard some good things about them on the hi-fi grapevine, and I was curious to find out what direction Elac have gone in now that Mr. Jones is no longer involved. So let's take a look at the debut 3.0 DB63s. The Elac debut 3.0 DB63s retail for £379 a pair in the UK. They're available in a walnut effect vinyl wrap or in black ash, which I actually prefer on these particular speakers as it draws less attention to itself. The speakers measure 339 by 195 by 298mm and are reassuringly heavy for this price and size at 7.9 kilograms each. Imperial measurements are 13.3 by 7.7 by 11.7 inches and 17.3 pounds. I like the satin black front panel set against the gloss finish of the woofer cone and the silver of the tweeter's phase plug. It provides some sophistication to what is overall a visually appealing design. The midwoofer has a 165mm 6.5-inch woven aramid cone coupled to a 1.5-inch diameter voice coil instead of 1 inch, which is often the case with speakers at this price. There's a large magnet structure, hence the weight. Both voice coil and magnet size should help with power handling. The 25mm 1-inch aluminium dome tweeter sits in a 108mm 4¼ waveguide that helps to narrow the dispersion of the tweeter to match the midwoofer at the crossover frequency, which is at 2000 Hz. The vertically mounted phase plug also helps to aid high frequency dispersion and improve the off-axis performance of the speaker. The cabinet is constructed from 16mm 0.6-inch MDF. That's pretty standard, but it's nice to see that Elac have gone to the trouble of fitting an internal brace on the DB63. That will help to reduce cabinet resonances. On the rear is one set of good quality gold-plated speaker binding posts and a flared port. This extends bass down to a -6 dB point of 42 Hz. The DB63s have a sensitivity rating of 87 dB into a nominal 6 ohm load, so bar any unusual impedance dips, should be fairly easy to drive. "5 years into my reviewer's journey, and I should no longer be surprised as to how good speakers are at this price, but I'm genuinely amazed as to how much performance designers can squeeze out when manufacturers must clearly give them very little to play with. The Elac debut DB63s have a maturity to the sound, the articulation with male and female vocals, and many instruments that occupy the heart of the mid-range is exceptional for speakers that retail below £400. Transients are crisp, there's decent body and even a hint of decay structures present, as long as the recording is of sufficient quality. Oh yeah, and that reminds me, there's an artist, someone who I consider to be a great artist, that passed away a couple of days ago from the point where I'm filming this. And I spent yesterday reacquainting myself with her debut album, which I hadn't heard in years. First Take is a masterpiece that refuses to be defined by any genre, as Roberta was drawing upon influences from jazz, gospel, soul and blues. Many people will be aware of The First Time I Ever Saw Your Face, but I'd urge you to play the whole album. Starting with the first track, Compared to What, a protest song where it's clear she drew inspiration from Nina Simone, but Roberta brings a vocal mastery of her own to it. The mid-range clarity of the DB63 shows off her vocals like very few speakers can do below £500, but it's the lack of bloom in the bass and the expressiveness in the highs and refinement of the tweeter that gives the Elac third generation debut speakers a grown-up presentation. Many accessibly priced speakers tend to boost the bass to sound impressive. I feel that Elac's Unify reference UBR62 speakers fall into this category. The Unifies are more dynamic, but I find them too rolled off in the treble, and the overall sonic profile is dark and heavy for my tastes. The £499 Q Acoustics 3030Cs will also give you considerably more bass punch than the new debut 63s, but they don't have the resolution in the mid-range or high frequencies of the cheaper Elacs. The bass is very well defined, there's nice extension, but they do come off as a little bit polite when it comes to dealing with dynamic shifts. These are speakers with an easygoing presentation because there's a noticeably recessed area in the upper mid-range, the presence region, somewhere between 2 and 4000 Hz. Step up a little in price and you will get more capable speakers for £599 in the Q Acoustics 5020s. They'll match the Elacs in resolution but deliver more bass thump and some welcome liveliness to the upper mid-range. Sound staging and imaging was respectable for speakers at this price. Again, they're not going to compete with the 5020s in this regard, but I was able to get the sound to sneak a little bit beyond the speakers left and right with my best recordings. The location of performers was a little bit vague, but vocals, lead instruments and percussive elements were clearly separated with my reference tracks. So what we have here are very articulate speakers that are dynamically a little bit polite and relaxed in the upper mid-range. I can't help but feel that this voicing is deliberate on Elac's part because they envisage the DB63s are going to be used in certain scenarios. They're going to work well in small rooms where they can be placed close to walls to get some welcome boundary reinforcement for the bass. I pushed them back as far as I could, but there's limitations due to furniture and the protruding chimney breast. Normally I have speakers much further out into the room than that, but I don't have any other specific setup advice. The DB63s were easy to place in my room. I suspect the fairly substantial waveguide ensures decent off-axis performance. I'll always encourage people to experiment with toe-in. If you want maximum treble energy, have the tweeters pointing at your ears. If you're trying to tame a bright system, have them pointing straight out into the room. I wound up with them somewhere in between. The DB63s also proved very easy to drive. I hooked up a £300 Bluesound Node Nano streamer and a £100 Fosi Audio V3 amplifier, which had no trouble driving the Elacs. The V3 has limited current capability. It's primarily suited to desktop or near-field listening duties, but I'd have no hesitation in recommending it with the Elac DB63s as long as you're in a relatively small room and are no more than 3 meters or 10 feet away from the speakers. I substituted the Fosi Audio V3 for my £349 Cambridge Audio AXA35, which expanded the soundstage, but the warm sounding Cambridge with the relaxed sounding Elacs sounded a little too cozy for my liking. I mentioned earlier that I think the DB63s have deliberately been voiced to work well in small rooms close to walls, but also with certain less expensive amplifiers that can have a boosted bass and upper mid-range. This kind of boom tiz presentation can sound impressive on a quick demo, but is ultimately quite fatiguing, and there are plenty of inexpensive amplifiers these days that don't have this kind of presentation. like the Fosi Audio V3 and the Cambridge Audio XA35. My £449 Iota VX SA3 places a subtle emphasis in the frequencies I'm talking about. These were almost perfectly balanced out by the Elac DB63s. But I wouldn't use the internal DAC on the Iota VX SA3, it isn't up to scratch. Instead, I delegated digital to analog conversion duties to the wonderful Bluesound node Nano. If you're using a PC, tablet, phone or something else for streaming transport duties and need an amplifier with a decent built-in DAC, I'd suggest the Mission 778X at £549. It's essentially a Quad Vena 2 amplifier in different clothing, but cheaper. The Fosi Audio V3 represents an excellent starting point for these Elac speakers, and I think the Mission 778X represents the summit. I wouldn't reach for amplification any higher to hear all that the DB63s have to offer. The Elac debut 3.0 DB63s are stylish, sturdy speakers with a mid-range resolution that exceeds what is normally available at this price. They have a tight, well-extended bass and high frequencies that sound open and non-fatiguing. Ideally, I'd like a little bit more mid-bass punch and an upper mid-range that didn't play things quite so safe. But these kind of traits are prominent in some traditional British monitors, some very famous traditional British monitors. It's a mature presentation, and the DB63s give you a taste of what that's about. There are more complete speakers available for a couple of £100 more dynamic and more engaging, and that's why I'm pulling them back from my top outstanding award, but I do feel I'm being a bit hard. These may well be currently the most accomplished speakers available for this side of £400. Who knows? I just have to use my best judgment. The Elac debut 3.0 DB63s get a very, very highly recommended from this channel. My question for today is simply, what kind of musical presentation do you look for in your speakers? I know what I like. Please share your thoughts in the comments section. I'll look forward to reading them. I'm sure you know what to do by now. If you want to support me here and what I do, like, share, subscribe, hit the bell notification. Check me out on Patreon. There's a couple of tiers you can access there if you think I can help you on your audiophile journey. Also check out the ABA Club on Patreon, which has some great ways to interact with me and fellow Patrons. But for today, for now, British Audiophile, signing off.